Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Wednesday, the 6th of March in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Jeremy Hunt prepares to cut taxes in the UK budget, but will it be enough to sway voters?
Donald Trump racks up Super Tuesday wins as a rematch with Biden becomes ever more likely.
Plus, would the last person to leave please turn out the lights? Birmingham City Council says street lamps will be dimmed as it's forced to make massive budget cuts.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The UK's Chancellor is planning a 2 percentage point cut to the rate of national insurance in his budget later today. Bloomberg has learned that Jeremy Hunt will put personal tax cuts at the centre of today's announcements ahead of an election expected later this year. The Conservative chair of the Treasury Select Committee, Harriet Baldwin, says reducing national insurance is designed to help working people.
One of the things that was so interesting was that we had 2p off the rate of national insurance. National insurance, of course, is very targeted at people who work, and it adds an incentive for people to work at additional hours.
Some of Baldwin's fellow Tory MPs have called for more and larger tax cuts. Senior party members have indicated to Bloomberg the Prime Minister intends to fight the election on the promise of lowering income tax.
Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says no fiscal giveaway is going to change voters' minds at this point.
I don't think there are any gimmicks or rabbits out of the hat that Jeremy Hunt can produce to convince us, or indeed the country, that the Conservatives are capable of delivering the change the country needs.
Wes Streeting's Labour Party colleagues say that they could inherit one of the worst fiscal handovers in British history if they win the next general election. An Ipsos opinion poll published earlier this week gave Labour a 27-point lead over the Conservatives with British voters.
In the United States, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are set for an election rematch after the Super Tuesday primaries. They looked set to win in almost every one of their parties' respective selection contests. Republican challenger Nikki Haley managed only a token victory in the state of Vermont. Political scientist Larry Sabato says a 2020 election repeat is inevitable.
I mean, there was a 95% chance or better that it was going to be Biden versus Trump. And of course, everybody whines and complains, oh, not these two, not again. And as that great moral philosopher, Mick Jagger, once said, you can't always get what you want. You're going to have to get used to the fact that we're going to have a rerun. And that's just the way it is. And people have 8 months to adjust to it.
Larry Sabato from the University of Virginia Centre for Politics speaking there. Donald Trump's inflammatory statements and his legal woes are a concern to Republicans, while Democrats worry that President Biden's age will be a limiting factor. Bloomberg polling shows 8 in 10 swing state voters said Biden was too old to be running again, compared to almost half saying the same for Trump.
Well, Trump is ever closer to clinching the Republican nomination after a series of primary wins, having won 11 out of 15 states on Super Tuesday, according to the Associated Press. Sarah Bianchi from Evercore ISI says that markets will be watching the election closely for economic outcomes.
President Trump and President Biden have strong emphasis on building domestic manufacturing in America. Trump a bit more through some of the trade and tariff wars that we saw, and President Biden with a lot of incentives, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. Some of those have rubbed allies the wrong way.
Political advisor and former investment analyst Sarah Bianchi speaking there. Trump's challenger, Nikki Haley, was victorious in Vermont, a traditionally liberal state Republicans haven't won in 36 years.
Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser says a reorganization of the bank aimed at making it more competitive has gone faster than expected. The story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Her remarks came at the RBC Capital Markets Global Financial Institutions Conference in New York. As she set out positive guidance for the year ahead, she said, quote, "We're not going to make the mistakes we have made in the past." Fraser has been under close scrutiny after initiating what's billed as the largest restructuring of Citigroup in decades, designed to propel the firm from a banking underdog to one competitive with its more profitable peers. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
OpenAI has fired back at Elon Musk after he sued the company. Writing on a blog, the tech firm behind ChatGPT said that Musk spurned the firm after pushing it to raise more money and proposing a merger with Tesla. The Post also reproduced emails that Musk had sent to people at the firm demonstrating that the billionaire had endorsed OpenAI's fundraising efforts. The Tesla CEO filed the lawsuit last week against the startup, alleging that they had strayed from their mission to build responsible AI whilst also becoming beholden to their largest investor, Microsoft.
Birmingham City Council has signed off on the largest ever package of budget cuts by a local authority in the UK. The Labour-run council voted to approve a £300 million cut to its own budget and raise council tax by 21%. Bloomberg's James Wilcock has more.
It's a dark day for Birmingham. No, really. Streetlights are being dimmed in a bid to save £900,000 a year. That's just 0.1% of the money the city owes after it lost an equal pay lawsuit. To find the rest, the council is cutting almost all arts funding, selling community centres, losing 600 jobs and reducing adult social care. Council leader John Cotton acknowledges the situation is bleak.
I'm very sorry that we find ourselves in this position. I'm a Birmingham lad, born and bred. I've lived my entire life here. So, this city matters profoundly to me, as do the communities that I serve as its leader. But I'm really clear as the new leader of this council that we've got to restore the council to financial stability and we need to take some tough choices.
It's a worrying omen for much of Britain. Nearly 1 in 5 council leaders in England said they were likely to declare bankruptcy in the next 15 months. In London, James Woolcock, Bloomberg Radio.
In a moment, we'll have more on our look ahead for today's budget and the latest on those results from Super Tuesday as well. But another story that caught our eye this morning, in case you're looking for a new job this morning, I'm not looking at you, Caroline, is NASA is seeking new candidates for astronauts for the first time in 4 years, in case you missed out last time.
Yeah, I remember actually that job post. It did sound amazing. And actually NASA's had some recent successes, hasn't it, in terms of launching craft. So maybe they'll get even more candidates than usual. Can't imagine the number of people who must apply.
Yeah, 12,000 last time around for 10 jobs.
10 jobs? Okay.
In fact, it's being pointed to the fact that there's been that TV series For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus as well, kind of demonstrating a resurgent interest in space. So perhaps that might be
seen that yet.
Something that that might help to spur this as well. The job based in Houston pays around $152,000 a year and requires, quote, extensive travel.
I like that line.
Deadline's the 2nd of April in case you want to apply.
Nice one. OK, I like that story. Right, let's turn our attention, though, to Jeremy Hunt. Plans to cut 2 percentage points off the UK's national insurance payroll tax in the budget. That's according to people familiar with the plan. The Chancellor, though, faces 2 tough audiences, voters and the bond markets. Joining us now is Bloomberg's UK correspondent Lizzie Burden. Well, to have a look ahead to what we're expecting from Hunt. Surprise? What surprise? Could there be a rabbit out of the hat moment for the Chancellor today?
Well, he hasn't got a lot of money for rabbits, Caroline, but this is one of the government's last chances to woo the public before the general election, so it's a distinctly political budget. We understand that his big rabbit, his big giveaway, is going to be cutting national insurance contributions further, the payroll levy, not income tax, as had been speculated, because an income tax cut would be more expensive and potentially more inflationary, whereas a NICS cut only applies to people in jobs, so it's supposed to incentivise work. However, it's hard to see how putting £10 billion back in consumers' pockets isn't going to be inflationary to some degree. Ultimately, the Bank of England may have to undo it by keeping rates higher for longer. So you have to ask whether it makes economic sense, whether it's fiscally responsible. And remember, November's NICS cut barely budged the polls. You've got Tory backbenchers already complaining that an income tax cut would be a sexier sell on the doorstep. So evidently, they don't think this makes political sense either, which is why our reporter Alex Wickham understands that an income tax cut could still be offered in the Conservative manifesto as the key battle line in the general election.
Lizzie, how does the Chancellor plan to pay for all this?
Well, he's going to have to scrape round the back of the sofa to get possible sources of income. One could be an extension to the windfall tax on oil and gas companies. Another could be ending non-dom status, this tax loophole that lets about £70,000 people avoid paying taxes on their overseas earnings. That has the dual benefit of stealing Labour's idea and leaving them hamstrung for cash, because they've already promised not to raise the three main rates of tax. So what you're witnessing here is a game of political chess where Hunt dares Labour to either scale back its spending plans even more or gamble that those bond vigilantes will back them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be on the watch for that. Lizzie Burden, thank you so much for being with us, Bloomberg's UK correspondent. She'll be out there on the green, of course, and listening out. 12:30 is when the Chancellor will begin the budget. That's the expectation in Parliament. And Lizzie mentioned bond vigilantes. There's a very good read on the Bloomberg terminal because, of course, this is front and centre for us. The Debt Management Office is expected to announce a really big target for gilt sales this year, perhaps another big record. And so we're not expecting, obviously, anything like the mini budget under Liz Truss. And yet those bond markets are on watch for whatever Hunt actually presents.
Yeah, indeed, worth reading the latest piece from our colleague Marcus Ashworth from Bloomberg Opinion as well on that subject too, because he talks about the tightrope that the Chancellor will have to walk because indeed of those questions around the bond markets. Well, let's go to the United States now, where former President Donald Trump has won 11 out of 15 states in the Super Tuesday votes. It means he's barrelling towards locking down the nomination for the Republican Party by mid-March. Trump's sole remaining rival, Nikki Haley, looks to have no path to the nomination. Joining us now to discuss, Bloomberg editor in Washington, John Harney. John, great to have you with us. So Trump, it appears, is cruising to the Republican presidential nomination. He called it conclusive. It's hard to disagree with that.
That's certainly true. You need, the nominee needs at least 1,215 delegates to become, the Republican candidate. He's very close. He's pretty close to that. He didn't quite get it tonight, but by the middle or around the middle of the month, it's expected he'll have the 1,215. Nikki Haley still remains in the race. She won the state of Vermont tonight after winning the District of Columbia over the weekend, but she really has no chance of overtaking Trump at this point.
Bloomberg's also been reporting, John, that Trump's campaign looks better organised. What's the pivot then to the November presidential election?
Well, yes, it does seem to be better run than the operation he had in 2020, let alone 2016 when he was new to politics, and he has clearly been trying to make the race more about the November election rather than the candidates, the opponents he had in the Republican primaries, even before, not just Nikki Haley, of course, but Ron DeSantis and all the others. But at the same time, he's been having a little trouble with fundraising, and has to make an effort to shore up his finances because it's these elections are as you know are very expensive.
What should we expect from Nikki Haley from here on? She won in Vermont. She continues to attract financial support, but surely her campaign can't go anywhere.
No, but again, she seemed, if she didn't drop out tonight, she might tomorrow or over the course of the next few days. She seems at this point trying to just show that there is not a majority, but a sizable part of the Republican electorate that does not want Donald Trump to be the nominee. And at the same time, President Biden won except for American Samoa, but won every contest tonight as well. And the race is shaping up to be a rematch. Yet a lot of voters have told pollsters that they would prefer other candidates. That hasn't happened.
A last point on Trump. He still faces criminal charges related to the alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, but he's had that Supreme Court victory too. So is that fading also as an issue?
The Supreme Court victory was to keep him. The Supreme Court victory was keep him on the ballot in Colorado, and that essentially ends any attempt to take him off the ballot. But at the end of this month, after probably just days after, or a week or so after he secures the nomination, he's scheduled to go on trial in New York in a state case regarding alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, the adult film star. And that trial seems to be going forward. The dates of others are a bit up in the air right now, and the Supreme Court still has to rule on his claim that whether or not he has immunity for anything that happened while he was in office.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.